So the last to have to do with poverty and then species extinction. So poverty, we do have this enormous population. What we often don't recognize is how impoverished much of the world is. And there are statistics like roughly 3/4 of the people living on the planet have a real income of $4 a day or less, $4 a day or less. The world is extraordinarily divided between the rich and the poor, and we're becoming a media transparent world, and people are beginning to recognize there are extraordinary disparities between the rich and the poor.
Yeah.
And the rich comprise a very small segment, really, of the
Tiny.
overall.
I mean, yeah, something like the really rich, about what, like 1.5%.
Yeah.
We're very, very fortunate people to be
Yeah.
sitting here.
Absolutely.
We are the affluent people
We are,
sitting on top of the economic
that's
pile.
Right. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
I think we have a responsibility there.
That's right.
Yeah.
So the last critical trend is then species extinction. And scientists, just summarizing quickly, estimate between 1/4 and 1/2 of all species are threatened with extinction by the end of this century. And if you think about this, what we're doing is killing off our food supply. Plants and animals, that's what we eat. And somewhere between 1/3 and 1/2 of all of our food supply is being threatened by the end of the century. So here we have this extraordinary set, and this isn't all of the trends. We haven't even spoken about.
And they all interplay with each other as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Like weapons of mass destruction. We haven't even spoken about trends like that. We're just speaking about trends essentially in nature, if you will.
I was at a conference recently on sustainability, and a professor stood up and he identified 20 key things that had to be taken care of and solved if we were to survive, 20 of them.
20. And
which we mentioned 6 or 7.
7. Yeah. We've only looked at 7 of them.
Yeah.
So here's what I'd like to do. I'd like to step back for just a moment and look at these 7 as a system. And because so often people, in my experience, will say, well, climate's the real problem. If we handle climate, we can take care of things. Or someone will say, no, it's world population, if we take care of population, and so on. And what I am seeing after 40-some years of work is that what we have is a system. And it's a system of interaction that's really the most critical challenge that we face. So let's go around the circle one more time. Let's turn, if we can, to a chart that we prepared for this, and just mention very briefly how each of these driving trends affects the singular trend called food that we rely upon. And so if we just run quickly around the chart, we see the first is climate change, and we've already acknowledged how this really can impair our ability to grow food. The climate variability makes it really hard for farming. The second one is oil, and that we're running out of oil, and that oil is not just used for cars and trucks and so on. It's used for herbicides and pesticides to prop up a high-intensity agriculture. So as we run out of oil, maybe we can afford it here, but people in developing countries living on $1 or $2 a day, they can't afford the herbicides and pesticides. So it's really going to impact food. We're running short of water in developing countries. They can't grow their own food. They're going to be relying increasingly upon other countries. But look, we had food shortages. We had food riots in 33 countries last year. So we're already pressing against limits. The oceans, a food source for many, those are being fished out. Population still growing, moving into urban centers. That's making it more and more difficult to be self-sufficient growing our food. Impoverishment, people just are at the limits of the world food supply right now. And lastly, species extinction, which is really extincting our food supply. And you put all of those together, and it seems to me that what we are facing then is a world and systems crisis.
Right. So what do we do? I mean, this is the scary bit. We said it is scary. So what do you see as the possibilities of what's going to happen?
Well, I think there are 3 major possibilities that I'm seeing now in the world. 3 major, let's say, scenarios, if you will.
Yeah.
One scenario I would call business as usual. The second is I would call unstoppable decline. And the third, profound maturation. So let's look at each of these briefly. First of all, let's turn to the scenario of the world business as usual. And that assumes with enough technology, with economic fixes, maybe with tax policy and government deregulation or whatever, we're going to return to business as usual.
This is the view our governments want us to be.
Our government, the politics, the media, this is the dominant point of view.
We'll be okay.
We'll be okay.
We'll sort it out.
We'll figure it out. We'll fix things. And as we have seen, as we have looked at climate, species extinction, resource depletion, we can't fix this. This is no longer fixable.
We don't have the will to fix it.
Well, the underlying assumption is that it can be fixed, first of all. And I think what we're saying is that that assumption is flawed. This that cannot be fixed. This is in the process of breakdown or breakthrough, and it cannot be fixed. Now, the benefit of that, because it does have a value, the value is that it keeps the whole thing going a little bit longer. It just perpetuates the status quo a little bit longer. But the blind spot is seeing all of these trends are not sustainable. So in a way, I'd like to dismiss business as usual because I don't think that's a realistic possibility for the future.
Right, nor do I.
Okay.
No, I think it's just, it's denial again, basically. It's denial of how bad things are. And it's like if a person is denying they have a serious illness, it's going to catch up with them.
That's right.
You recognize what's happening and seek appropriate treatment.
That's right. So the second major scenario that I see is a world in profound decline, an extraordinary breakdown. And the basic assumption is that we've gone too far, we've passed too many thresholds in climate, resources, species extinction, and all the rest, that we've gone too far. And we're going to cook the planet, and we have potentially, we're going to extinct even the species. And so what I'm seeing now is a growing literature exactly about that. And for example, James Lovelock, the man that came up with the Gaia hypothesis, that's exactly what he says. He says we're doomed. He says, quote, "We're now so abusing the earth that it may rise and move back to the hot state it was in 55 million years ago. And if it does, most of us and our descendants will die." And he is a very respected scientist. Here's another major figure, Bill McKibben, who wrote this book called Earth. He writes, "Earth represents the deepest of human failures, but we must still live on the world we've created lightly, carefully, and gracefully." So the second major scenario I'm seeing is one of unstoppable decline.
And also, I don't think we're not even showing the willingness to try and stop it. That's what gets me, is look what happened in Copenhagen. People we're trying to set climate controls, which the scientists say aren't even enough to save us anyway, and we aren't even willing to make those modest things because each person is self-centered, looking at what they want. And so we don't even have the will to do it. I remember several years ago, the World Watch Institute in Washington worked out the cost of what it would do to solve many of these problems you talked about, and it came out to be less than what the world spends on military, quote, defense each year. If we put the defense budget...
Far less.
We put the defense budget, but we're more concerned with military defense. Anyway, we need to move on because we're running out of time.
So then the last scenario is that of profound maturation. It's saying that what we're going through is a rite of passage as a human family, the fire of initiation, and the challenge then is for us to grow up as a human family. So the underlying assumption is that this is a natural process of development, of growth, that what we're going to do is mature, we're going to grow up as a human family. The benefit of that is that it's a more promising, positive view of the future, but the blind spot could well be that we're a maladapted species. Maybe we're not destined for that kind of promise and transformation. Maybe this is an evolutionary dead end like so many species have already encountered. So I think it's realistic to say that there are blind spots in all three of these different scenarios.
So I think the question is, and this is what I think everybody should be, or who's watching should be looking at, is what do we as individuals, what role can we play? Because it's okay to say, oh, the politicians aren't doing what they should be doing, business is wrong, this is a situation. Is there anything that we as individuals can be doing together en masse.
That's right. And I believe there's so much that we can do. It's the work that we do, the clothes that we wear, the car that we drive, the food that we eat, and so on. It's everything that our lives are made from. And if there's going to be change, it's going to be change that comes from the grassroots, from our own lives and our own life experience.
Great. Well, as I said, this is a monster subject, and we've just really started. I think in other programs we're going to be looking at some of the things we can do, but many other issues as well, as I said at the beginning, things that fascinate us around the whole nature of consciousness, where we are, change, acceleration of change, and we were looking, as you said, at the oceans, at dolphins.
Yes.
So we'll keep going with these discussions. What I'd also like to do, though, is just to suggest to anybody who's interested to give us comments on what you think. We have a website, PeteandDuane.com, just PeteandDuane.com, and there you can send us your comments on what you think, any suggestions you have, and we'd be glad to actually put those on the site as well.
It'd be great to hear from people and to hear your suggestions for shows, as well as comments on the programs that we've already offered.
And in the next program, we're going to hopefully be looking at, in a sense, where did we go wrong? What happened to our thinking, our decisions, our consciousness that actually led us into this situation and to behave in such strange ways, actually, and not have the will, as we say, not have the will to solve them. So we'll be looking more into the individual and our own psychology, so how we got here and what we can do about it. So till then, this is Pete Russell.
And I'm Duane Algen.